Morning, everyone. Welcome back to Northwestern. We have a lot of new faces here. So who hasn't been to a third Thursday yet? Yeah, so about 30 to 40. So we're going to have a fair number of people still trickling in over the next few minutes. But thanks for coming to Third Thursday Sports and Performance Grand Rounds. This is a monthly event where we host a guest speaker to talk about a topic of their interest or their expertise. And we're excited to have Dr. Sarah Kupras here with us. And I'll let her introduce herself. She'll do a much better job than I could. But next month we're going to have a paramedic, Dr. Tim Howie, a seasoned paramedic who's going to be talking about the role of a paramedic on the sports medicine team. And he gave me his paragraph here just a couple days ago on what he's going to be talking about. I'm really excited to hear about that as well. The following month we're likely to have a strength and conditioning coach at a university level to talk about his or her role on the sports medicine team. And then to finish off the year, we're going to have somebody from Down Under presenting on sports chiropractic, mostly outside of America. Broaden our horizons a little bit. Just a couple of bits of information here. There is a sign-in sheet, so please, if you have not signed in, please sign in. There's a survey there as well. We're always looking for new ideas and topics that you would like to hear on these Third Thursdays. And please help yourself to the Minnesota Chiropractic Association sponsored breakfast, coffee and fruit in the back by our new catering service. So thanks again for coming, and I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Well, thank you. Is that good? Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay, good. So, well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Dr. Sarah Kupras, and this is my sidekick, Lauren Kozlowski. We are going to talk about, we've integrated an athletic trainer into our chiropractic practice in the last little over a year and 13 months essentially. So, kind of talk about how that came to be and what we're going to do with it. It is still under development, so we certainly don't have it all figured out. And if you have other ideas, we're certainly open to those as well. But just kind of talking about how it's really developed into something beyond what I actually imagined it when I first brought him onto our team. So my name is Dr. Sarah Kupras. I practice up in Sartell, which is up at St. Cloud. So yes, I got up at 4:30. I didn't. Yeah, it was a good drive though. I'm a sports chiropractor. I'm an athletic trainer. I was never going to be an athletic trainer. I hung out in the athletic training room in college because it was cool to hang out with the athletes. What's that? Required, yes, exactly. And so started hanging out. It was a work study job. So hey, this is awesome. I kind of dig this. Had a little bit of sports medicine experience through high school. And took most of the required classes except for one of the PT classes, which PT3 qualified for in chiropractic school. So was able to sit for the AT exam actually right after I graduated, which I don't recommend because I took the test like a doctor and not like an athletic trainer. So I flunked part of it the first time I took it, which was never part of the plan. I don't flunk anything. I've never failed anything. So that was really soul crushing. And then I retook it once I figured out how to take the exam. Totally, it was a different story the second time and so passed. So that's what allows us to have the arrangement we have is because I'm a certified athletic trainer. For right now, it's what allows us to have what we have. So athletic trainer, chiropractic, sports physician, or practitioner, depends on who you talk to. I'm also certified in pediatrics. So, and I'm also a doula. I mean, we've got lots of stuff on our plate. So we do have I would say, a fairly schizophrenic practice. We have babies and little kids and pregnant moms, and I'm crawling on the floor and trying to treat little bugs, and then the next minute we're treating marathoners and dancers, and so it's a ton of fun because I never know day to day what I'm going to be doing. So I've been in practice for 13 years. We've always had chiropractic services and massage therapy in our clinic. So we moved into a 3,200 square foot clinic last July, so we've been there just over a year. I started my practice in an office share situation, which was fine. It served a purpose. It allowed me an opportunity to start a practice. It was not ideal. It was another woman, and she doesn't play well with others, bottom line. And so it was really a challenge for me I stayed there about 2.5 years, probably about 2 years too long, but owning a practice was never going to be what I was going to do. So it was an opportunity that it just afforded me the opportunity to create a practice within her space. So 2.5 years in, moved to our old location, which was about 1,300 square feet. I was going to be the only doctor, have some staff, do the thing, right? Like rock on. And I knew nothing about designing space. It was not ideal. We had 2 treatment rooms and a massage room and a front desk space. Didn't have enough storage space for files and all of that stuff. And just about 6 years ago, I needed help. Like I was working 5-6 days a week. This is crazy. I have more patients than I can handle. And so we hired our first associate at that point. So I've had another doctor in my office for about the last 6 years, which has been really great. So when we moved into this new space, it was about a 2-year process of moving. Once I knew the space was available, kind of from some people that I knew, and designing the space, it was an eye clinic. And so they were upgrading. They had outgrown the space, and they were building a freestanding clinic, which, awesome. You can build $1 million building, rock on, all by your old space, which is perfect for us. And so a lot of the treatment rooms were there, cabinets were built in, the front desk was there, so we didn't have to do a lot, except that they had like 500 square feet or 600 square feet of retail space. We don't sell eyeglasses, and I don't need that much for supplements, right? So what do we do with that space? How do we flow patients through there? And I worked with somebody to help lay out the clinic, somebody who got patient flow and space design for chiropractors, and she was fantastic to work with. So we moved there at the end of July last year. We added Lauren in September. I had met Lauren a few years prior as I doulaed for him and his wife, their second baby. And I was like, dude, no way, you're an athletic trainer, super cool. And we connected over that and kind of just kept in touch after that, and came time to add that to our practice, and it was like, yeah, this makes sense to do. So we added him in September. I had to share him because he was finishing up school. So he had duties at St. John's and St. Cloud State, so we kind of had him part-time, and then he graduated in May, and then he passed his exam.
The first time.
The first time. It's a new exam. It's all on the computer now. Come on. We also added a craniosacral therapist in February of 2016, and she has been an outstanding addition to our team as well. So we've really, when I moved and doubled our square footage essentially, really wanted to create a space of partnering with strategic partnership with the right people who are awesome at what they do and who are doing the right thing for patients. And so, so far I think we're on the right track. So when we first moved there, so we moved in July, I didn't have time to manage, like, we have a beautiful rehab space now. I didn't have time to set it up. And so we brought Lauren on in September. I'm like, set this up, do what you want with it. I don't really care. Here's the stuff we have. Arrange it, do what you want. This will be your domain. This will be your space. So, we had some modalities. We added a spinal leader. The other doctor that works in our clinic has been in practice. He's 60, so he's been in practice at least 30 years. And so he's much older than me, and it's just a different generation. And so he practices much different than me. His niche is the Medicare patient, even though he won't admit it. He's really good with them. And I don't love them. Like, they're okay, but they'll lie to you. They don't want to do their work, and they don't want to do their exercises. I will treat them, but I don't love them. And he connects with them over farming and this and that, and it's just a different generation. But he loves the spinalator, the little rolly table. I've never used it. Like, never used it in my office. I don't even know how to turn it on. So, but that's his thing. So we added that because he just really wanted that. We added inversion. I got an inversion table just a few weeks ago, a few months ago actually. As for patients to try it before they buy it, we've had some patients really tell us their stories about, I don't get adjusted very often because I hang every day for 5 to 10 minutes. I'm like, really? It's that impressive? Okay. So we bought one so people can try it, and it's actually been pretty well received. We've had some really great results with that. So we've got a rehab area, strengthening area, some mats for stretching and that kind of thing. So one of Lauren's first jobs was to set up our rehab space. And we've added equipment and subtracted equipment, and we put it upstairs in storage, and we keep moving it around. So in the last 12, 13 months, we keep changing it. He also helps with the therapeutic exercise. When you only have so much time with patients, you either hurry through your Therax with the patients or you don't do it at all. And I was finding I wasn't doing it as much as I had been because I didn't have enough time. And so that was another thing that I really wanted. You know, most of the patients in your office should be getting some sort of rehab at some point in time, right? So that was a big piece of my practice that had been missing that I really wanted to get back to. And so we created some protocols. Here's what I want. You know, show him some glute strengthening, show him this, and he knows exactly what I mean when I hand a patient off to him and tell him to do that. So, and then also he's been assisting with Graston technique. So a lot of the athletic trainers have exposure to Graston technique, but they don't necessarily haven't necessarily been trained in it. I'm an instructor for Graston, so I taught him initially what he needed to know, even though he had experience with it. He's actually taking a course in October. So, but again, that freed me up because if I don't have to spend 30 minutes with a patient and I can only spend 15 and adjust them, then I can pass them off. The initial use of the athletic trainer, I didn't use Lauren as much as I should have. I will be the first to admit that. The first issue was that I felt like patients, this is my own problem, but I felt like patients were going to feel slighted because they got less time with me. But in fact, once I stopped thinking about it that way and I thought about it from the perspective that they actually are getting more service and better service because Lauren was able to fill the gap in the things that I couldn't do or didn't have time to do. And we got great feedback from the patients. And so it was like I had to get out of my own way before we could really effectively use Lauren in our practice. So since then, since he's graduated in May, we've had him back full time, and we've evolved his duties and responsibilities, really using him more as a physician extender. So athletic trainers frequently will work in orthopedic offices and things as physician extenders, or almost like PAs, really. So he'll help me out with new patients, doing histories and exams, you know, your re-exams. Again, things that are time consuming, that are kind of putsy and take up your time. You know, and really it was how am I most valuable to the practice? What am I best at, right? My adjusting skills and diagnosis skills. So the rest of it is easy and can be done by someone else who has the knowledge. So he'll get those subjective updates. If I'm running behind, I'm like, oh, can you go start with that patient, get a blood pressure, get their subjective, right? Because you have to take a blood pressure once a year at least on a patient. So just doing those things that I wasn't doing, and that takes up my time. Doing some more of the advanced Graston technique. And then we're looking at adding new modalities, like what else is out there? Systemic dry needling has been one of the babies that he wants to bring on. If you want to talk about that.
So I started looking into dry needling after working at St. Cloud State. I had an athlete that had a hamstring issue and we couldn't figure it out. After going through everything we could, he went home over spring break to Chicago, and there's someone that did it there, and I told him to try it, and he tried it, and things were great. After his next track season started to flare up again, he went one more time, never had a problem with it again. So that was my first experience with dry needling, kind of third party. And then I started thinking about what we could do to bring in. Well, I looked up dry needling and who offers it and where it could be, and we found a course and we're trying to set it up, and we're in contact and working on it now, and we're trying to actually host a course in St. Cloud, Minnesota. So that was a big part, because looking at the area, I just checked, there's 3 people in the state that offer it, that are on their site. You can look them up as providers of dry needling. That was it. So I said, well, if you want to find a niche, that's how you do it. See what works, and then bring it into your practice. So I talked to Dr. Sarah about it, and she said, yeah, go for it. So, which is pretty much how the rehab space and everything kind of started. I said, I'm thinking about this, and she's like, yeah, okay. And then she would run off into another room, and I would kind of continue on my way doing what I do. And adding that and working on the Graston technique and kind of covering down for her whenever she can wasn't like we sat down and said, this is what I want you to do. It was kind of a go out and get them, see, do what you can to help me out. So the more that I cover down for her, if it's say a new patient, which takes 45 minutes of her time usually, if I can do that subjective part, get the history, do the exam, that takes 15 to 30 minutes that puts back in her schedule, and that's 1 to 2 more patients that she can see throughout the day. So then you're just kind of rolling in more people, and as she said, it's not taking away from her care to them, we're actually adding to it, because now instead of her having to go through all the rehabs and exercises and making sure that she's covering all the bases, I can do it and do that kind of babysitting part of, have you been working on it? Okay, and so we do the good cop, bad cop. So she'll come in and they love her and everything's great, it's Dr. Sarah, and then I come in and they go, this is gonna hurt. You know, so and if it does, it's because you probably haven't done what you were told to do. So that's kind of where I took it, and she just kind of gave me the ball and I ran with it.
So dry needling is not within the scope of chiropractic practice, even if you're certified in acupuncture, unfortunately. But it is within the scope of PTs and athletic trainers right now. So hopefully that changes, because somebody on the listserv for the MCA had questioned whether or not they could dry needle, and I'm like, nope, unless you're a PT or an athletic trainer. And the response that I got was, oh, so if I'm less qualified, I can do it. I'm like, well, if you want to look at it that way, I suppose you could, but.
That's not saying you can't, you can still take it as a DC.
Yes.
So.
We've developed a way better rehab protocol than I've ever had in my 13 years of practice. There's a lot of things you always want to do and you just don't get to do, right? You run out of time, or your schedule isn't allowed with patients or whatever. So Lauren has been helpful in developing rehab protocols for patients. I've got tons and tons of binders full of stuff, but if you don't get to integrate it, it doesn't do you any good. So it was finally time to integrate all this great stuff that I've had. So we email exercises. We use Hep2Go, which is free. You can subscribe to it for super cheap. Exercise protocol program, and you can customize every patient what you want them to do. So here's your 5 exercises, sets, reps. Here's what I want you to do. It's a picture and it's words. So sometimes reading the words, people don't get it, but they look at the picture and they go, oh, I know what to do. And so that's been way better for patients. Compliance, thank you, that's the word. Because number one, they see it, they get it, they do it in the office with Lauren, and then he sends it to them, and it gets in their email box, and it's another reminder to do it again. Hopefully they print it off. If they don't, and sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, can you send that to me again? Yep, no problem, doesn't take us long to do. So again, a small thing that took my time, but I wasn't doing because I ran out of time, has really been very helpful for compliance and for patients. Our goal in our practice is to get people better faster and get them out of there, right? Like that's what you want for your patients. I believe in wellness care and we believe in maintenance care, but let's get your initial issue taken care of. And I really believe that education is a big piece of that. And I believe that getting people to do their stuff isn't, like, they need to own it, right? Like, I spent 15 minutes with you, like, this is not my responsibility. Like, you spend all day with you. This is your responsibility. And you pay me now or pay me later. If you don't want to do your exercises, that's fine, you're just gonna be in here more. And that's what I tell people frequently. And for the most part, I feel like it's pretty well received. So some people don't like to hear that, but you know, you have the patients that just want you to make them feel better, and that's all they want. They don't want to do anything, just make me feel better, and that's okay too. And Lauren does a lot of the modalities, e-stims, ultrasounds, a lot of therapeutic stretching, that kind of thing. We see a lot of dance. We have a rush on high school dancers right now. Dance team is very big in central Minnesota, and they all have hip problems and no butts, right? They all have weak glutes, so we've got a rash of high school dancers, and they don't like Lauren at all. No, like they're like, oh, really? I have to see him do? Yep, you do. So the other thing that we're working with, and how do we effectively use Lauren, is really creating more outreach opportunities. When you're working in your practice and you have a busier practice, you don't have time, right? Like when you're starting your practice, you've got nothing but time. You got more time than patients, right? So and you can get out there and you can do outreach stuff and meet people and go to gyms and get your face out there, right? But then when you're busier, you just don't get those opportunities. But I think it's still really important. It's important for brand recognition. I feel like it's important for just getting your name out there. So we've been looking at, now there's 2 athletic trainers in the office, so who can we partner with? And we talk to patients all the time. Like, we just had a patient this spring who, their kids play ultimate, and they don't have anybody that covers their sports. They do these tournaments and there's no one there for medical coverage. Huge opportunity. They don't have a ton of money, but they're willing to pay something, and if we are willing to provide coverage. And so you start with baby steps, right? So there's a big stronghold in central Minnesota, the Orthopedic Sports Center. Like, they provide coverage for all the major events. There's a lot of events, a lot of smaller events that don't get covered. So how can we partner with those club sports and those other groups that just don't have as much money and resources, and they don't even know where to start, right? Like, they don't even know who to hire. So just talking to patients and getting the word out there. It's part of our website that you can hire us for athletic training services now, which was a nice idea.
That was another thing. I worked a lot on the website. The company we use is supposed to be updating it and transitioning stuff. I send them a lot of emails about changing stuff. And going for the club sports in those lower budget areas was something that, looking at the business side of things, if you pay attention to the sports world, there's a lot of high schools are kind of getting upset with the club sports at this point, because club sports offer the opportunity to be able to travel more. Their budget isn't as good because the parents are usually the ones kind of forking the dough to get the kids in there, but there's a lot more opportunity. So looking at it that way, it's a growing field. So why wouldn't you go for something where you can kind of tailor what you're charging or what you're doing to that event or to that club, and then be able to offer it to them? Because you look at it, there's no one there. So these kids are running around playing hockey or football or whatever it is, risking everything, and there's maybe a paramedic there at that time, if it's a tournament, maybe. So looking at it that way, so if you get in for low money, well, as it increases and grows in popularity and you get your name out there, that's going to grow. So it's another way to bring in those referral sources and stuff like that. And then with that, you also, as the next bullet is you need to have an MD on staff. So working with a few doctors in the area, we've been able to kind of, even if it's someone that you might not totally agree with the practice, but there's a doctor there that they're a good doc and you know it. Use that as a referral source. You know, so you get on good sides with them, they're on good sides with you, you can talk back and forth and everybody's happy. So we've been working on that kind of round and round, and yeah.
That's an ongoing conversation.
Always is.
And I use the words partnering with an MD, but it's really about, again, that strategic partnership or that strategic relationship. You start doing right by patients. Most patients go back to their docs and they say, oh my gosh, they are so amazing. Like, we have one guy, I don't adjust him, we Graston him. He's got bad hip surgery, bad knee surgery. He's a farmer, so he doesn't sit still. He rides his horses, and he's awesome. I love him.
He's a rancher.
He's a rancher, sorry. Not that he's a rancher, horse rancher. And he goes back to his MD and he's like, oh my gosh, they are so amazing. And that Graston stuff, that really works. And his MD hears that. And in fact, his MD, that leads to the third bullet point here, is that CentraCare, which is the health system up in central Minnesota, up in St. Cloud, they're pretty much it in St. Cloud. They contacted me, his MD contacted me and said, hey, we want to partner. We're ready to bring on, what do they call it, integrative healthcare, and we want to have a conversation. And I was like, okay. And then he started talking about money, and I went, whoa. Like, this is more than just having a conversation. And really what they want to do, you know, what Fairview is already doing, right? They're bringing chiropractic within their system. And CentraCare finally has gotten on the bus a little bit to wanting to bring that in. And I am just happy to have a seat at the table to potentially change how chiropractic is delivered in central Minnesota. Whether they choose us or not is a different story, but I'm just super excited to be able to have a conversation and sit at the table and have that conversation. But I think allowing Lauren, you know, and we've kind of played through lots of different scenarios on what that would look like, and I'm like, well, I would advocate to bring you with me because he is an athletic trainer, so much more valuable than a nurse to me. A nurse to me doesn't know half the stuff he does. So that would be one of my advocacy pieces, is that I need him, I don't need a nurse more than anything else. So, and then the last piece here is that we have some fun case studies. So one of the things that I have really loved about bringing Lauren on is that practice is fun again, and it's not just me. So we can go into a room and we are on the same page about what's going on with the patient. I don't even have to tell him most of the time, like he gets it. We think alike, which is really fun. And patients think it's funny because I'm like, see, I didn't have to tell him, and he knows. And it's been a lot of fun to treat cases. Like I said, the associate that works in my office doesn't practice anything like me, which is okay, and it works. But yet, it's kind of nice to share somebody else's thought process that thinks the way you do. Again, big picture, you know, if it's a knee problem, we're looking at the hip, we're looking at the ankle, just those types of things. And so somebody whose brain works the same way yours does. And so that, for me, has brought me a lot of joy. And when you see these people get better faster than what you could have done on your own, I think it's been a lot of fun to practice. And it's really revived my, it really reminds me that it was the right choice, but it also kind of revives my energy for going to practice every day, going to work every day, because I find a lot of joy in it. And we're seeing a lot more athletes. And that is very
Pregnant
interesting.
powerlifters, that's our newest one.
There are some of those too,
Yeah.
which is like the perfect combination of everything that we do, right? So we're going to start with a couple case studies that I feel like we could have picked a million different case studies in the last year that we've worked on. But we picked 4 of them that were fairly significant that we both felt, I feel like we both played a really good role in. Do you want to start with?
Yeah, so Tyrion, if you're a Game of Thrones reference, you'll kind of get the names. So he's runs a desk job, 45 years old, plays guitar, very holistic in his view on how he treats his body and very natural and stuff like that. So he came in, and it was actually right when I started working with Dr. Sarah, he showed up. So my first time working with anybody actually in the field was an adhesive capsulitis. Basically is what we came down to, which I don't know if anybody's read up on it or knows what that is, but it's not the easiest thing to recover from or to treat, because there's really no backstory. It's insidious and it just happens, and it's mostly common in, looking at the research, it's homemakers, mothers at home, and they get it for whatever reason. And they still haven't quite figured it out, but based on his symptoms and what he was going through and just some special testing and stuff like that, range of motion type stuff, it all narrowed down to this one thing. And looking at it, I said, okay, well, we can treat you here. We can, loosen things up, try to get you going. And he said, yeah, I'm on board. So he didn't actually want to go in. There's other ways they could do capsular injections and surgery and a bunch of other stuff. He didn't want any of that. He wanted to recover the way you're supposed to recover, so just with work. So we're putting in the work, and I was using ultrasound, Graston, some electric stimulation just for pain, stuff like that, and then he also had his home exercise program that he was doing on a very regular basis, trying to keep that shoulder moving and keeping it loosened up. It took, 6 months before, I think it was 6 months when I cut him down to every other week. So he had comparable range of motion on both sides, within 80–85%, and it was to the point where he could keep it there on his own and actually increase it just with his stretches and home exercise program. So I said, we're cutting you loose, which at 6 months is pretty remarkable considering the average from physical therapy and stuff like that they say in the research is usually around 12 months before they come back. And the thing with frozen shoulder or adhesive capsulitis is that it can just disappear. It just goes away and their range of motion comes back. So that didn't happen with him in that time. You can cross your fingers and hope, but it didn't. So working with him through that and all the challenges that came with it, because of the shoulder problem, he was having, what was it, tendonitis in his?
Yes,
tenosynovitis in his wrist, and a gauntlet of, he's compensating, so he has some neck problems, and you can talk more on the bony part of that. but working with him through it and seeing how you can kind of tailor your exercise programs and your treatment day to day based on how that person's coming in. One day with that could be great. The weather changes and whatever, the sun's not shining as bright, and all of a sudden it's worse. So working with him was pretty rewarding, and watching how he improved and having someone that's actually active in their own therapy was very nice. So now we're at almost a year, and he comes in with some aches and pains and stuff like that after maybe doing some heavy activity. His bathroom just caved in this last week, but when he comes in, we kind of treat the pain, keep him going so he can keep doing his exercises, and he stays the same and increases on occasion, and he's doing good. So
I would say that from a chiropractic perspective, this particular patient has been a patient for a few years, came to be very not okay with getting adjusted. His history, he had been seeing a $20 cash guy in town before seeing me, and so he was referred by another patient, and so you can probably guess what kind of care he was getting. I don't know anything about that doc or how he practices, but I'm like, really, $20? Like, cheapens what we do. But so he came to me, and he actually came to me because he had, bless you, he had right anterior rib pain, and it was a really prominent rib. And so you're taking this history, and this is the don't judge a book by its cover patient for me. Like, he comes in, he's got piercings, he wears a studded belt, he's all black, like wears black. It's like
full sleeve tattoos.
Okay, what am I supposed to do for you? But then I was like, he's the nicest guy in the whole world. And this was like I said, don't judge a book by its cover. And so really what started this anterior rib pain, this was old, this was an old story. He actually had been assaulted in an alleyway after a bar, after a bar closed one night. And that's when this all started. But you can imagine that right anterior rib stuff would lead to shoulder stuff. And it was his right shoulder that we worked through. So the stuff shows up in my office like, hey, can you help me? I got all this pain in my rib and in my shoulder. And I said, well, I don't know, but I would certainly try some Graston. And let's start there, and really working the joint capsules through the rib, and then even into the pec and upper straps. And he hated getting adjusted because he didn't trust me. Because and as you get to know people, right, you hear their stories. And he's got lots of tattoos, and I would pick one and like, tell me about this one. Some of them look homemade, right? Like, and you learn his story over time, and you're just like, oh my word. He's also a vegan, so I think that is not necessarily a hindrance to his healing, but I think it's a factor because he's not getting potentially as much protein as he could be. So from a muscular perspective, and he's a thinner guy, doesn't have a lot of muscle tone, so I think that's also a factor into his healing. And so long story short, the rib stuff we have taken care of. It's hardly ever an issue. But now he's like, oh, my neck needs it. I need an adjustment because he sits at a desk all day now, which is a new job for him. But the shoulder stuff has really come along nicely. The tendinosynovitis I couldn't figure out. We were Graston, and we were adjusting. We were doing everything. And I think it's related more to the shoulder than anything, because since taking care of the shoulder, the tendinosynovitis doesn't flare unless he plays a lot of guitar, which I'm like, haha. And I'm not going to tell him to stop playing his guitar, right? Like, I will be like chased out of the office.
An interesting history factor on this guy was something that we didn't realize right away, but that was brought up when we started doing Graston near his shoulder. He's a medieval history buff, and one of the big things that he brought up was the knowledge that most knights get killed by being stabbed in the armpit because it's not armored. And so doing Graston in that area would actually be worse with a metal instrument than not doing it all, because he would tighten up and start to hyperventilate, basically. So there is a lot of psychological stuff that played into this too, which made things very interesting to kind of work through and talk through someone. So it was an all-around just learning experience in every aspect.
Fun case. He's still a patient. He still comes in every couple of weeks.
Yep.
And in his case too, it was so much better for us to be able to offer those basically PT type services in our office because it was convenient. It was easy for him. He was already coming. He didn't have to go somewhere else. I didn't have to refer him anywhere. And we had amazing outcomes, which I'm pretty particular in who I refer to as far as PTs and stuff. I don't want somebody who's just gonna fix your shoulder. I need somebody who's gonna look at everything. And so I'm very particular on who I send to for therapy. But that's another aspect, is that we are able to keep those patients and keep that money really in-house, which again helps your bottom line, right? So, do you want to talk about her? Or do you want me to?
Oh, Aria, yeah, she doesn't like me. So Aria is a 11-year-old dancer, and with dancer, I mean she's in 3 or 4 different types of dance. She does probably, 15 hours of dance a week?
4 nights a week of studio dance, and then she just got on the dance team.
Yeah.
But she's doing both.
So she's a very
Awesome.
active 11-year-old, and she doesn't like to talk a whole lot at all. So if you ask her a question, does it hurt? She's
Meh
Yeah.
is the answer I get out of her.
Yeah.
Meh. I go, I don't know what meh means. You need to give me some more.
So she had some right knee pain starting out, and we started treating that with, I believe it was Graston. We did some kinesiotaping on it, gave her some stretches and some exercises, and she had previously been diagnosed with a slight scoliosis and leg length discrepancy because of that. But working on the knee, we kind of got that to start to resolve, and all of a sudden she was having hip problems. So work your way up, right? And usually what we've found is working with patients with Graston and chiropractic work and all that kind of stuff, things start to kind of like trickle down, and either they'll go out their arm or out their toe is usually what happens. With her, it actually went up to her hip. So she had some clicking, and she kind of described it as a slight, pain or ache when it would happen, and she would have it a little while after her dance practice ended. So we started working on that, and she was a very reluctant person to do anything that we asked her to at home. So the biggest one is foam rolling and doing some stretches. And this is the part where we actually had to start getting on the mother, who was always in the treatment room with her, saying, no, she would say, well, she was up in her room for 2 hours working last night, she said she did it. Well, I can go through right now and test her range of motion and tell you that she hasn't done anything in at least a week. So getting on the mom and the parent to say, hey, get her rolling, because otherwise your dance time is going to be maybe a couple more years and you won't be able to do it anymore, because you're just going to suffer from injury upon injury. So that was something that was a little bit different than most of the people I've worked with in the college setting, actually having the parent there and using the parent to get the patient to do something. But Dr. Sarah's work with her was, she liked her, she didn't like me.
This was a good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, it definitely was, because I would walk in, and sometimes she would walk in, do this objective, do her adjustment, do whatever, walk out, tell me this, and this, give me an update, and then I would walk in and do my part. The next time she would come in, I would walk in, do this objective, do some stretching, check her range of motion, see if we can change anything up, and really get her loosened up before she walked in, and then she would do her adjustment. So we'd flip it back and forth. So she was always guessing, but whenever I would walk in the room, I would get the audible sigh.
Definitely.
Yep.
So have anybody treated 11-year-old girls before? Yeah, right? Like, some of them don't always like to talk at all. When she first came in, like, she was terrified of getting adjusted. I had treated mom before. So mom was all about this, and she originally presented with this right knee pain, which wasn't really knee pain. It was more of a low back issue, a biomechanical dysfunction out of her low back. And so lots of education, right? Talking to mom, have a mom understand it. And she just, like, poor Emma, Aria, HIPAA violation. She was terrified. Like, she had tears the first time I adjusted her. She was so terrified. I'm like, it is okay. Like, so I had to walk her through the adjustment. Now the adjustment's probably her favorite part, because she doesn't care for being stretched out, right? Especially in her hips, because it's not always the most comfortable. But we probably had taken care of her knee symptoms within maybe 4 or 6 visits. It was really pretty simple. And I don't know if you've ever worked with like junior high and high school dancers, like they have no core, they have no glute strength, they overtrain. So every dancer that we've ever treated, they all say, yep, at the end of the season, everyone's injured. Yep, because they practice. They start practice already in August, and their season will go until spring. So when they go to state for dance, it's in the spring. So it's basically an all year round sport. And they're in really terrible shape as far as core strength goes. And then they're doing high kick, and they're doing all these things that they just really have no core to be doing it from. And so that presents a big challenge for us with her. Again, that typical lower cross syndrome, tight psoas, no butt, doesn't want to do her exercises, like doesn't give me I'm like, how are you feeling today? That was the answer I got. I don't know what that means. You need to give me a little bit more, and pulling information out of her. And mom just kind of would be like, I don't know, I can't really help you. She hasn't even been complaining, so I take that as positive improvement on her part. So she's somewhat compliant, I would say, in her home exercise program. Doesn't like to foam roll, doesn't like to stretch. So I suspect we will see lots of her in the next few years if she wants to do dance team. And again, she's doing studio dancing and dance team, so she dances every day after school for 2 hours and then goes to studio. And with the amount of kick that she does, it's ridiculous. So of course she's gonna have a snapping hip, she's gonna have a tight iliopsoas. And if she doesn't take care of herself, she may not make it to her senior year, which is unfortunate for her, but I hope she does, but you never know.
Okay, so Cersei here works a desk job at a phone company, basically, and she went out swimming with her kids. She was doing, I don't remember if it was it was the backstroke. Didn't have it up there. And all of a sudden, she started having shoulder pain. It just like that happened with swimming, and. But she came in, she talked to Dr. Sarah, and Dr. Sarah pulled me into the exam room, which is usually what happens, and get in there, and she starts going through some stuff, and it was kind of your typical impingement syndrome type deal. So she had brought her hand up and over too many times, repetitive motion through the same thing, and that's what happened. It was the end result. We initially started treating her using Graston, which actually we had pretty good results as far as her pain relief afterwards. The first couple treatments with Graston, everybody's kind of sensitive to it, stuff like that, and but for her, things just started to kind of go down. Her level of pain and her range of motion started to increase, and then at one point I started throwing in ultrasound just to take that pain down. So just kind of a low wave ultrasound, and started using that, but we kind of got, I wouldn't say stuck at one point, but she was trying to work on it and things were coming along, but she's in this holding pattern as far as her range of motion goes. And she started working with a personal trainer, and what usually doesn't happen that I've seen is that the personal trainer, you can send them something and they actually do it. They actually listen to you and say, don't let them do this, have them do something different to keep them out of that range that's going to cause them to fire up. Well, this personal trainer said, nope, I know exactly what you're talking about, this is what we're going to do. And she tailored her whole workout that she was working with this patient on to that injury. So she said, nope, you're not going to do that, you're going to do this. And she managed to incorporate all of her range of motion and strengthening while keeping her out of that range that's going to flare up. So by doing that, we were actually, instead of like a PT clinic, seeing this person 2 to 3 times a week to get that range of motion and pain down, we were actually just able to say, no, you're seeing your personal trainer and things are working great, keep going. And that personal trainer actually was very beneficial to what we were doing, because every time we see her range of motion was going up. She might have some residual pain. We could treat that. We could work on her little aches and pains and then send her back out and then continue that process. So she improved actually very fast, and now she's only seeing us once every 3 weeks or something like that, just for kind of maintenance type stuff. So it worked out very well for her.
So, again, chiropractic patient of mine for many years, chronic low back pain, and now she's got the shoulder pain. So it was a perfect partnership. It was really fun to treat her because we could easily incorporate what she needed to do. Again, that relationship with the personal trainer, she happens to be a patient as well, so she gets how we operate. But again, developing that relationship was huge. So she knew that we're not full of bunk, right? That we knew what we were talking about. And so she was willing to consider what we had to offer and what we had to say as far as her injury went, incorporating that into her, because some personal trainers are all across the board as far as what they know or don't know. And so developing relationships with really good ones can be really important and really helpful. And really it's about what's best for the patient, right? And that's the bottom line. And so we didn't have to bring her in 3 days a week to watch her do her exercises when we knew that we could trust that her personal trainer was doing what we asked them to do. So, and she loved that. She didn't have to do personal training 3 times a week and come to us 3 times a week. Because again, that just gets to be too much and then your compliance goes down. So, so we see her for maintenance visits, but very rarely do we see her for flare-ups of the shoulder anymore.
Right.
So she's been a really fun patient. This is probably my favorite case study though.
Yeah, so Daenerys, she came in initially with just the low back pain just from working out. It was just a pop and then it happened. This one was right when I was starting, I believe also is when this one started, and it went down to her knee. So she was having a lot of problems with squats, so it was a lot of biomechanical stuff. So every time she would come in, we would have her do squats right in the exam room, and we'd watch her. Okay, this is what's going on when your knee is clicking at this point, when this muscle's firing, and Dr. Sarah and I would go back and forth, and she was actually one of the first patients that thought it was really funny how we would talk to each other. It wasn't in complete sentences. So working on her, we started using Graston and stretching, and as far as patellar alignment, she had some quad muscles that weren't firing in the right order, stuff like that. So we were using kinesio tape to get them to fire, to calm them down, to adjust their patellar alignment, and that really seemed to help. So we managed to get through her knee pain for the most part, where she could do squats and she wasn't having pain and she didn't need to be taped up. And then she presented to one of her last appointments with some calf tightness, stuff like that. And
I would say that this case has started in her low back,
Yeah.
then went to her hip, then went to her quad. So it was just going down the chain. And so for her to show up with calf tightness wasn't completely unreasonable. Okay, now I see where we're going with this. As she was changing her squats, she was 30 years old, active, works out at the gym every day. So she was super fun to treat, and we're doing active stuff. So she's in a squat position and we're using Graston on her, and it was really fun. But she shows up with this calf pain. And so Lauren taking a look at her and was like, I don't know. Grastoned a little bit, lightly,
Yep.
did some anterior stuff. And as I go in and I'm talking to her more, and she goes, well, I do have a history of DVT, within the last year. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Okay, tell me more. She goes, this was Tuesday, I think, a Monday or Tuesday, early in the week. She's like, this started on Thursday or Friday the week prior after working out. And they had been doing stuff on an incline treadmill.
yeah, incline treadmill and split squats and a few other, which with her changing the routine with her personal trainer, it wouldn't be anything unusual for her to come in with something else that's sore. It happens. But yeah, she described her workout, and Dr. Sarah took a look at her, and then that's when I came in the room after that, and we were both kind of sitting there, and things just didn't work. They didn't look right.
Nothing was changing anything as we were treating her. Pain was still there. It wasn't getting better. It wasn't hot and red like you would typically expect to find, right? You're like, okay, hot and red. She had gone to the urgent care, not to the ER. She had gone to urgent care on the weekend, on Saturday. They scanned her. Nope, there's no DVT. which is the only reason why we actually did a little bit of light GT on her. And I was like, you know what? No, I don't buy it. And so I referred her out of the office. I'm like, we're done for the day. And I think you still have a DVT, even though it's been ruled out. I don't buy it. I said, I want you to go back to the doctor you worked with originally. They scanned her in the urgent care, for Pete's sake, and they missed it. So she went back to the original doc. Yep, told sure as heck, DVT. And she's like, so I'm canceling my appointments until this is better. I'm like, yes, that's a really good plan. But she was so grateful for, I mean, she was like 90% improved already. She was able to work out the way she wanted to. And then she had a CVT. So she's had 2 DVTs in, I think, a year, which is crazy. So I think there's a bigger story there that she needs to investigate, whether that's blood thinners or birth control pills, or there's a bigger story there. So I needed somebody who knew her, who was familiar with her history. So, but I was like, it was one of those victories. I'm like, yes, you guys missed it, we caught it. I knew I was right, dang it. And so that was a really fun case. And then I was bummed that she had to cancel the rest of her appointments, but I'm like, yep, I totally get it, because I don't want to touch you, because I'm not letting that thing go and go somewhere it's not supposed to go. So, do you have anything else to say about her?
Nope.
Okay, so she was super fun. Really, we have awesome patients that come to see us, and this is our clinic, Chiropractic Performance Center. Are there any questions? Yes.
Did you feel like your background in like athletic training, like chiropractic, was like sufficient, like to become like sports medicine expert, or do you like do like a lot of like outside seminars? Obviously, like Graston, you take seminars for maybe ART, seminars for. Do you like any other kind of thing?
I do lots of stuff. I'm a believer that if I'm going to spend 20 hours a year taking continuing education, I'm going to spend that time and money on stuff that's going to make me a better doctor on Monday. So I am constantly taking stuff, going to symposiums like the ACBSP, which is the CCSP, Board of Sports, Chiropractic Sports Physicians. They put on a symposium every year. The ACA Sports Council puts on a symposium every year. Helps you keep current on what's new, what's great. And I think that's really helpful. As far as my athletic training education, I didn't know it at the time when I was in college that I was going to end up in chiropractic school, but what an awesome mesh of the foundation of knowledge that I have. In my background, I have a degree in exercise science, and so like the science of movement and all that. And so totally makes sense, totally relates. Do I think you should keep doing continuing education? Yes, because there's, as you guys know, right, whether you're a student or you're a doctor, there's a lot of snake oil, there's a lot of bunk things that are out there that people can get on that bus, right? And it's like, well, what's legit? Science is my background, so if there's not science behind it, if there's not research behind it, I'm probably not going to buy it. Like, I'm not going to buy into it. But so I'm more of a like prove it to me kind of gal. So yeah, I do believe that continuing education is absolutely important, and strategically choosing how you're going to spend your time and your money, I think, is really valuable. You know, if you're going to sit your butt in a seat for homecoming and get your 20 hours, that's fine. But how much of that are you actually going to utilize? So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
For those of us who aren't athletic trainers and want to have a similar type of practice, do you recommend like partnering with an athletic trainer in a way, or I guess how do we go about having a practice like that? I mean, we're taking Graston and doing the taping and all of that stuff, but I guess how do we get to that level if we don't have that athletic training background? Because we don't get a lot in school.
So to partner with an athletic trainer, is that what you're saying? Like, how would you bring an athletic trainer in, or what else?
I mean, like, is that what you recommend if you don't necessarily have that background, if you want to be working with athletes and
take as many CE classes as you can,
Yeah.
and the more athletes you get your hands on, the better your experience will be, right? I've done all kinds of stuff, and even I've been in practice for 13 years. I've rotated through the Olympic Training Center twice, once in California, once in Colorado Springs, and I learn something every time I go. So never be too proud to do something. That would be my, nothing's above you, right? The athletic trainers are working on getting their scope of practice changed. So under the scope of practice of the athletic trainers right now, a chiropractor cannot supervise an athletic trainer. So if I was just a chiro, I couldn't have Lauren in my office. Yet. It didn't get passed through Congress through the legislature last year, but I know they're working on bringing it back for 17. So hopefully that gets changed. Part of the change in the scope of practice is to allow chiropractors to supervise athletic trainers. And honestly, as a sports chiropractor, I think I'm way more qualified than half the doctors in town to supervise an athletic So I hope that actually gets passed this year. We'll see if the work actually gets done. But, so there's potential that that's coming, and that would be an opportunity, absolutely. Otherwise, strategically, you know, partnering with the colleges, you know, that's where I ended up finding Lauren. You know, the colleges that have athletic training programs, is a great place to start. Just getting your name and your face in front of those head athletic trainers even is really important as well. So, yeah. Any other questions? We were so good, only 2 questions. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having us.